Okay, hello there, my loves. Right, today I'm reviewing a book that's quite fitting, I suppose, considering it will be Good Friday when this comes out. It's Tuesday, if you want to know when I'm recording this. I read this book last week it was, and it wasn't purposeful. I didn't read it because Easter was approaching. It was pure coincidence. But anyway, we're looking today at Michael Moorcock's Behold the Man. So we'll get to the cover in a moment. I'm sure there's been many versions of this particular cover, but this was originally published in magazine form in 1966, I think, in New Worlds magazine. And the following year, it won Best Novella. It won a Nebula Award for that. 2 years later, still, 1969, it was released and published as this expanded version. But even so, it's still quite a short story. Now, this is the very first Michael Moorcock book I've read. Can you believe it? I can't believe it myself. I actually do have a number of other Michael Moorcock books, mostly fantasy, the Elric novels and various other things, but I've never known where to begin, and so it was quite interesting that I chose this particular book to begin with. And I've got to say from the outset, I began reading it thinking the worst. I wasn't really enjoying it to begin with, but by the end I thought it was really marvellous. But we'll talk about that as we get there. So, of course, this is the cover that I've just shown you. I've scanned my own version there. What do you think of this one? I mean, it definitely references the time machine. We'll talk about that in a moment. That what's he called? Carl Gloger, that's his name. That's the chap that travels back in time to meet Jesus. That's the whole point of this, really. So it looks like a cracked egg, really. It's an effective image, but nothing too special, is it really? I'm not that bothered about it. I'm sure there's been better incarnations of it, but still, I quite like it. I like that the red glow coming out from behind the time traveler, and the very indistinct landscape that's been painted around it. Sorry, I had to go and get some water. I was a little bit parched. I can only imagine, I haven't read around this, I can only imagine, however, that there was a fair bit of controversy when this story was released, because, of course, it rewrites the whole story of Christianity in a way, and the provenance of Jesus himself. But we'll get to that. Anyway, there will be spoilers here. But I'll talk about that as we get on. Then you can switch off if you've never read this or heard of it and you want to read it fresh, my loves. But basically, this centers on a very troubled young man by the name of Carl Gloger. So I find it hard to pronounce that name, and there's no mystery there, my loves. I can't pronounce words at the best of times. But anyway, this is a troubled young man who's studying psychiatry, I think. But he has major issues himself. He suffers from various neuroses, including the Messiah complex. He's had homosexual experiences in the past. He suffered child abuse as well, it must be said, from a priest. He has trouble with women. He has trouble with himself, really. He's a very confused and mixed up man. And for whatever reason, he wants to go back and meet Jesus. So it's all very, very far-fetched. I mean, the fact that... So he goes into a time machine in 1970. I mean, this was obviously written in the late 60s, and time travel was obviously a million miles away from them back then as much as it is for us now. But that's beside the point. This is merely a vehicle for this story to unfold. But yeah, one of his intellectual friends has dreamt up this idea of time travel. There's no kind of explanation as to how this damn thing works. But it's, yeah, as I said earlier, it's merely a vehicle for this story. So he goes back in time. He wants to meet Jesus, talk to Jesus, it seems. But yes, concerning the time machine itself, it's interesting in that it is spherical. It certainly references the image there. It is filled with a fluid. because by all accounts, time travel is a nasty business and you're thrown all over the place. No idea why, but there we are. So back in the lab, when this chap was explaining time travel, he sent a rabbit back in time briefly and brought it back, and the thing was completely buggered. It was broken bones. I don't think it was entirely dead, but it had rough treatment. And so the idea is that if you're sending someone back almost 2,000 years, it's going to be a hell of a lot worse. So they filled this spherical object with a kind of fluid. And so when the time machine lands in this time, it does so quite violently. And so the outer shell cracks and this fluid is released. And so this is a very literal form of symbolism to show a birth of sorts. He crawls out of this machine into 23 AD or something like that. So in the time of Jesus. And yes, he succeeds in that he goes back to that time. He's learnt the ancient language that they would be speaking in that area. I've already forgotten what it is. It's a form of Hebrew, I imagine. I can't remember. Archaic Hebrew. Hebrew's archaic in itself. I'm making a fucking shambles of this already. I'm sorry, my loves. I haven't prepared. I just thought I'm very busy this week, so I thought I'll try and knock this out, and it's going to be terrible. Of course it is. But anyway, goes back, and one of the first people he bumps into is John the Baptist. So there's credence to the story, or if you can call the Bible a story, or the writings of the Bible, it's whether you believe it's a fiction or not. It's confirmed that John the Baptist existed, and there's a conversation between them. Right from the get-go, John the Baptist thinks this chap is special. His followers, John the Baptist's followers, have witnessed the arrival of Carl in this time machine, and of course it's seen as a miracle, a literal miracle. It would be a miracle if we saw it, but there we are. And so already there's something special about this Carl. Anyway, we follow Carl's progress in search of Jesus. So he's heading towards Nazareth. That's where he's heading for, to try to... He's not quite sure at what point in time he's reached, whether it's been accurate enough. I think he's speculating that he'll get to the point where he's being crucified. It's around that time. So he's expecting a Jesus that's grown to maturity, let's say. Now, there's various trials and tribulations that Carl goes through. And as we proceed, he's getting deeper and deeper into creating his own myth. So this will all be a spoiler, basically. But as we go, we see what's happening. He's becoming the Jesus himself just through his actions. He's curing people as he goes along by curing simple maladies of the mind, for example, people that are blind, but just because they think they're blind. I mean, this definitely explains a troubled time in which everyone's probably suffering from mental health issues anyway. The Messiah complex is all over the area. Lots of people come and go, prophets that portend to be the next Messiah. So he's able to cure people using the simple psychiatry, I suppose you could say. I thought that was an interesting idea. Some of the other miracles that are explained in the Bible, like the walking on water and things like that, those are kind of introduced as asides where somebody observes him. I think already there's a heightened something about him because he's kind of manic. He's stressing out about where he is and what he's doing. He's starving a lot of the time. And just because of the craziness of his position and the fact that he's subsuming the role of Jesus. We'll get to why he's doing that in a moment. People are seeing him through a different perspective. You know, the steely set of his eyes, a slightly manic set of his eyes, perhaps. There's something about him. And so it's easy then to read things into what he's doing. Of course, a lot of the people that are following him are starving as well. So, and there's the sun, of course, you know, you start hallucinating when things are like that. But there we are. So anyway, he goes in search of Jesus, and he does find him. And indeed, he is the son of Joseph and Mary. Although the provenance of the Immaculate Conception, of course, is very quickly explained away as the fact that Mary was having sexual congress with someone outside of wedlock before Joseph came on the scene. So that's already explained away. So there's lots of things here that won't sit right with someone, a devout believer in the Jesus story. But Jesus himself, Carl discovers that he's not described in this way, but he's a gibbering idiot, basically. He has serious problems, mental problems. He can't speak, so he's non-vocal, and he likes going around stealing things. So this obviously crushes Kyle. His idea of, he set his heart on this being real, for example. And so this is when he goes off and starts thinking along the lines of, I'll bring it to fruition myself. So it's really interesting how that happens, really. So someone that's come from, the contemporary Britain of 1970 with all the problems he has himself, then goes back to become the saviour of humanity in the Christian faith. I really like that idea. Interspersed throughout the whole of this story is extracts or glimpses at Kyle's past, his troubled upbringing, for example, his experiences with women, his interest in Jung. I don't know much about Jungian philosophy, so I'm not going to get into any of that. At a certain point near the beginning, I certainly thought I was reading a book that was beyond me. Let's put it that way. This happens occasionally. It happens more often than not. Let's put it that way. But I thought it was tiptoeing towards pretentiousness, but it isn't. I think it's done really, really well. So we get these snapshots of his past, and then also kind of passages from the Bible even, and then kind of fragmentary sentences that perhaps Kyle's thinking in the here and now or in the past eventually he starts forgetting, or after everything he's going through back in, AD 23, something like that. So yeah, Jesus would be in his early 20s. He's starting to doubt his previous existence anyway in the future in 1970. And so slowly but surely he starts to become this person anyway. But yes, I suppose there's a lot of people that must have read this or heard of this book and thought, there's no way in hell I'm reading this. Is blasphemous. This is beyond the pale. You can't say that Jesus was a normal man. Well, not just a normal man from modern times, but one that was deeply, deeply troubled and had very serious mental issues. Yeah, it doesn't look good. But I think if I were a believer, I mean, I'm not religious in any way, I would like this portrayal to a certain extent. I mean, I think it casts Jesus in a completely different light, but at the same time, one that is driven to bring about a cause that he believes in, and that he knows that a lot of other people, of course, thousands of millions of people, will need in the future. There is a selflessness about that, despite the fact that the initial impulse in doing all of this was quite a selfish pursuit and a dangerous one, really. I mean, you're risking altering time by even getting anywhere near someone like that. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Let's put it that way. Yeah, if I were religiously inclined, if I believed in Jesus, I would be quite happy with this version of Jesus, I suppose, to a certain extent. I mean, I think even if you don't believe in any of this, I still think of Jesus as, I suppose, the best guy ever, and it does get marred. That image gets marred by by Carl. But at the same time, Carl expresses or inhabits humanity as a whole. Humanity is flawed. And so it's really interesting that someone that's an expression of how flawed humanity can be, that he then becomes immortalized as the savior of humanity. Of course, that doesn't really work out, does it? I mean, yeah, anyway, we won't get into that. But we also, there's an interesting scene at the end where he's being crucified. And at this point, he's in such a kind of psychotic, he's almost in a coma, I suppose, in that he's lost all feeling. So he doesn't even feel the nails being hammered into his wrists, his hands and his ankles. In fact, he thinks it's being done to someone else. So there's an extra removal from self at that point. Of course, later on, once he's spent some time on the cross, the pain starts coming. And interesting, this is a mega spoiler at this point. I've already spoiled the whole thing, really, in a way, talking about most of what happens. But his last words on the cross are, "It's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie." And he's saying it in English. And so a lot of the stuff he expostulates when he's really having a hard time of it is in English. And so I think to other people, they think he's speaking some, higher language perhaps. And so that "it's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie" is misquoted later on. And I don't know what it's I'm no religious scholar. So I can't remember but I know his last words on the cross was supposed to be something more profound than "it's a lie, it's a lie, it's a lie." But that's really interesting. And also the idea of his resurrection. His body was taken down from the cross and then studied by a doctor, the doctor believing that this person was special. But it goes on to say that the doctor is disappointed when the body begins to rot. So the whole thing, any kind of mystical, any kind of supernatural element to the Jesus figure is completely removed by all of these things. Interestingly, there is a sequel to this. Fucking hell, I'm so unprepared. Breakfast in the Ruins, in 1972. So that's a sequel of sorts to this story. I had no idea of that. But anyway, for my first bit of Moorcock, this was a bloody good read. Let's get the devil down. Now, I did struggle at times, and I struggle like hell to read passages from the Bible anyway. The way it's written is almost incomprehensible to me. I struggled at times with that, and the way it would flip-flop between times, and even the internal monologue, which didn't always marry with what you're reading. At times I felt not only confused, but frustrated and out of my depth, let's just say. But once Carl goes through the motions of trying to bring the Jesus figure to where it should be, I was really invested in it. I was really interested in it. So I'm going to give this 4 out of 5. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. It didn't completely blow my mind, but it was wonderfully written and nice and short. I mean, yeah. Nice length. But there we are. I'm sorry. It's I may have to re-record that because I've done that in one take and it's awful. But if I go back and see it's okay, you'll be hearing me saying this. If not, it'll be a completely different thing and I've completely wasted my time. Now, let's leave it there, my loves. Thank you for watching and listening. If you have, and yeah, do check that out. It's definitely worth a read. I'm going to be popping on to the Elric novels next. The next thing I read of Moorcock will be the Elric novels, but there we are. Thank you and cheerio.